So what I'm going to talk about for a few minutes, very quickly, is the concept and the idea of developing an entrepreneurial mindset. When Malu introduced me, you heard I'm a professor at Belmont University, which is in Tennessee. Jack Daniels, right? That's country music. So I come from Nashville. Belmont University is a university very much like UFM, although a little larger. We have 10,000 students, but we have a very aggressive, very active entrepreneurship program. But the way that we think about entrepreneurship in our university is a little different, right? Because, and this is where I'll start, when in general, in society, when we go and when we ask people, what is an entrepreneur? We typically think about people like this, right? Who's that? Edison, right? Inventor of a light bulb and 1,000 other patents, or people like him, right? Henry Ford, or people like these folks, right? Some of them are not very popular these days, perhaps, right? But certainly recognized as iconic entrepreneurs. But the way that we like to think about entrepreneurship, it's broader. It's broader than just the notion of these are individuals, or an entrepreneur is someone who starts a business. Generally, of course, certainly when we think about an entrepreneur, is like that person who started something from scratch and is a business and made a lot of money and so forth and so on. But really, the way that we like to think about it is it's about developing a mindset. And when we expand the definition, when we think about it this way, then entrepreneurship has a place regardless of what we do. Yes, if you have an idea, like Alejandra, and you want to start a business, and deploy that, absolutely. But it also has a place, when you understand it a little broader, it also has a place in corporations. It also has a place in the nonprofit sector, and it would even have a place in government. Not a lot of entrepreneurial thinking in government, but it also would have a place there. So let me just walk you through a few ideas. And I will say that many years ago at the university, we adopted this idea of expanding the concept and thinking about a mindset, because when we started talking to employers, right, very much like, and this is true really across the world, what we kept hearing over and over again when we would ask people, what are you looking for in a university graduate? What we would hear all the time is, we want people that, three main things. A, know how to work in teams. 2, recognize their role as global citizens. And 3, that have an entrepreneurial mindset. Right? So when we heard that, and for that it was like, it doesn't matter what they study, it doesn't matter what field, it doesn't matter what company. When we heard that that's what employers wanted, we took it upon ourselves. That's something that we really need to be paying attention to. So that's why we shifted the way that we teach it and think about that. So no presentation is complete without talking about some definitions. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of definitions to kind of set the tone, tell you what I like about these definitions, what I don't like about these definitions, to kind of frame a little bit the concept of entrepreneurial thinking. So Robert Ronstadt says that entrepreneurship says that it's a dynamic process of creating incremental wealth, and that this wealth is created by individuals, right? And the individuals that assume risks, certainly in terms of professional career, time, financial resources, etc. And it doesn't have to be something totally new. It can be something that already exists. The key is that the entrepreneur inserts or injects something in that project, in that idea, in that business, something that is different. It's what we refer to as the USP, the unique selling proposition. Maybe what you're doing, what you're thinking about doing already exists in another market, in another country, in another vertical, but what you do is you insert a unique way of doing it or bringing it to market. Now, what I don't like about this definition, let me tell you what I like about the definition is that it says the word dynamic process, right? A process means what? If you do A, B, and C, then D happens, right? So that's a process. And so by that, if you understand how the entrepreneurial process works, then you can create something. Now, what I don't like is that it says creating incremental wealth. I like wealth, but I don't like the word wealth there because it's a little constraining. So you see, I changed it to value, right? Because value is more inclusive, it's broader. Because in an entrepreneurial endeavor, not always the ultimate goal, what you are creating or what's most important to you is financial rewards, right? Sometimes it is, and when we understand in the stricter concept of business creation, of course, that's wealth creation is what we want, but that's not always true, right? Many of us, hopefully I'll share some examples, are involved in entrepreneurial endeavors that the ultimate goal that we want to create is not financial returns exclusively. Harvard definition says something like entrepreneurship is a process by which individuals pursue opportunities without regard to the resources they currently control. That's a mouthful, right? That's a lot of words. But what I like, again, is that it's a process. And the other part that I like to highlight here is this notion of pursuing opportunities without regard to the resources they currently control. Because some of you already have businesses or have started an entrepreneurial endeavor. Some of you are thinking about it. But the truth is, you're never going to have everything that you need. Think about it. You're never going to have all of the money, all of the people, all of the talent, all of the technology, right? All of the fiscal assets, right? So in fact, part of the entrepreneurial process is like understanding what you have and creating a model that you can deploy that creates value despite the fact that you don't have everything that you need. So because we know, maybe sometimes you find yourself being that person. I certainly know a lot of people that they have really good ideas and they don't pursue them because they're like, I don't have this and I don't have this and I don't have that. Now, I understand you have to have some minimum things, but they don't see the lack of having everything as a detriment to pursuing the dream. Does that make sense? All right. Syracuse University says that entrepreneurship is a process of creating value. I like that, creating value, by bringing together a unique package of resources to exploit an opportunity. And what I like about this definition is that last part. You bring together a unique package of resources. Think about it as a puzzle, un rompecabezas, right? Every piece is different. And when they're laid out, there's nothing there. It's a unique package. The financial, the human, the talent, the technology. Once you bring it all together, what do you have when the puzzle is complete? Something new, something that didn't exist, something of value. And so these definitions, I think, help frame, I hope, how we start thinking about developing an entrepreneurial mindset. And so someone that has an entrepreneurial mindset is then someone that brings all of those resources and pursues those opportunities, brings the money, brings the people, brings the technology, and ultimately creates something of value. Maybe it's money, but maybe it's something else once it's deployed, once you create a business plan and you deploy it. So I'm not gonna have time to explore this, but if I had some time, I would ask you, what is a mindset? What do you understand by a mindset? And you probably would have some kind of definition that goes like this, right? That a mindset is a belief system, is what you believe to be true. It's the viewpoints that you have about a particular thing. Right? It's the way that your brain processes information. That's the mindset. And that's the way that you make decisions. And so when we're talking about an entrepreneurial mindset, it is that set of beliefs that we have, those connections in our brains that cause us to have to deploy, to show an entrepreneurial behavior. And what is an entrepreneurial behavior? Behavior is that really is those actions, that mindset, those actions that push us to identify opportunities and that ignite our ambition, right? And it helps us to connect dots in ways that are sometimes not very obvious to us, but that helps us improve systems, come up with new ideas, new projects, and ultimately, why not, new businesses. It's necessary. It's imperative that regardless of what you do, in a world that's changing as fast as it's changing, right? This is an industry that's changed very, very fast. As I told you, I come from Nashville music, right? So that's why I use this example. How quickly, right? Music is one of those industries. How quickly it has evolved. It's continued. It's a change. It's a world that's changing. And so when I'm talking to a lot, of course, the music industry is very strong in where I come from. And so when I talk to a lot of employers there, like, that's what they want. They want students that are able to identify what's happening, what are the opportunities in the marketplace to adapt to the new technologies, to the new ways of distribution, to the new opportunities that emerge when the world is changing so quickly. The industries don't go away. The industries evolve. It's the way that we bring solutions to the problems that exist, to the opportunities that exist, what helps us if we have an entrepreneurial mindset. So far, so good? And so if you kind of capture kind of the gist of what I'm saying, then entrepreneurship has a place, has a permission to exist in many different facets of our life. Yes, if we want to start a business, but also it has a place in corporations. That's what we refer to normally as entrepreneurship. I can tell you lots of stories of individuals who work for companies like Procter & Gamble or Nestle or Nestle or whatever, large consumer brands that inside of those, they develop, bring together resources, develop and launch products, services, new businesses. One of my colleagues is the guy that invented and brought to market potato chips that are not fried, but baked. Baked Lay's, baked potato chips. Huge success. He did it inside of Frito-Lay, right? Frito's a huge corporation, but he was the guy that took him 10 years to bring the product to market through what he describes as an entrepreneurship concept. So I've used the word opportunity a lot, especially in my definitions, right? Opportunity, seeking an opportunity, bringing together packaged resources to exploit an opportunity. And because my time is limited, I usually talk about the different traits of an entrepreneur or someone that has an entrepreneurial mindset, but I just want to focus very quickly on the opportunity orientation piece, because I think that's one that resonates a lot with all of us, right? That person that has an entrepreneurial mindset is someone that is opportunity seeking. And so let me just very quickly give you a couple of examples of what I think about, or what I think about when I think about someone that is opportunity seeking. The first thing I like to say is that there is a difference between an idea and an opportunity. Let me say that again. There's a difference between an idea and an opportunity. An entrepreneurship happens when opportunities exist. Now, you need an idea. It all starts with an idea. But that idea has to really be an opportunity in the marketplace for you to be able to create value. Here's what I mean. We all have all ideas every morning, every day. We have tens, hundreds of ideas. I had an idea this morning that I want to sell jets, planes, to teenagers. What do you think about my idea? You're thinking, that's a stupid idea, right? But it's an idea. Maybe it's a small plane. Yeah, there you go, right? But it's an idea. It's an idea that does not deserve to exist in the marketplace, but it's an idea. So how do you differentiate an idea from an opportunity? So I think there's three quick buckets: observing trends, solving problems, or finding gaps in the marketplace. And because you guys are in the process of thinking about your own entrepreneurial endeavors, or you've already started, I want you to try to connect this to wherever you are in your journey, right? The first one is observing trends. I like to say that if you are paying attention to trends, like what's a trend? Something that is popular, something that people are paying attention to. And in that regard, we talk about demographic trends, economic trends, right? And so we can talk about, for example, the trend of green energy, right? Worldwide, for the most part, we understand that environmental stewardness is a trend. Like we're paying attention to, to the environment. And so it's not a surprise that there's not a lot of entrepreneurial activity around the creation of solutions around green energies or renewable energies, right? But because that's a trend. What's another trend in society? Another trend in society is, certainly in the United States, I think this is true everywhere, healthy eating, right? I know, I've seen it with my students. My students today are much more conscious, aware about what they eat, where the food comes from, right? What the origin of the food, the ethical elements of food production, right? Ethical consumerism and all of that. And so that's a trend. Certainly it's a trend in the US. And so that's not surprised that when I go to the grocery store today, I see lots of new healthy products because they're capitalizing on that trend. A lot of restaurants, new concepts, right? New healthy initiatives. Not fast food, not as popular anymore as it used to be at some point. So that's a trend. Second is solving a problem. There's usually an opportunity when you can solve a problem. Alejandra's example is one of those, right? Every time that you can convince somebody to give you money, if you solve one of their problems, that's a source of opportunity, right? Every time that you can persuade someone to give you money for solving their problem, that's a source of opportunity. I have a good friend who has the license to this parking. This is a park, this technology, right? That it's basically turns a flat level surface parking lot into a multi-level parking garage, right? I don't know if you've seen those. He has the license in Mexico City, right? Back in my hometown. The traffic. I used to say the traffic in Mexico City is the worst in the world. After being here for 3 days, I don't know. But parking certainly is a problem in Mexico City, right? Everywhere. And so he brought this technology, solving a problem, and so now he has like 12 or 14 of these, and he's doing great with it, right? Solving a problem. Catherine Kerrigan, she was a student, not at our university, but she was a student, and her professor on a Friday gave her a homework assignment, her class. She was in an entrepreneurship class. And she said, okay, go through the weekend and think about a problem that you might experience during the weekend and see if you can think about a solution to that problem. And I heard her tell the story. Catherine is very tall, and she was a student athlete. She played volleyball like at a collegiate level. She was very, very good, very tall. And so she was going through the weekend, and she said, I never have a problem finding shoes for for playing volleyball, like the athletic shoes. I never have a problem. But when it's time for me to buy cute shoes, nice-looking shoes to go out or, to look nice, I can't find them. Because it turned out that most manufacturers stopped producing shoes one size too short from whatever her shoe size was. She was very tall, so her feet were bigger than most. And so that was a problem for her. So she went and she talked to her friends in the team, the volleyball team, and many of them said, yeah, I have the same problem. We can't find shoes. And then she talked to other team members and other teams, all the teams that she was playing that weekend. And so you know where this is headed. So she finished her homework because she showed up on Monday and said, this is the problem. And she actually launched her company, Catherine Kerrigan Footwear. Now, the company has had ups and downs, but in general, I use it to illustrate. If you have a problem and you have a solution, that's usually a source of opportunity. And then the third bucket is finding gaps in the marketplace, right? If you find a gap in the marketplace, anybody here play guitar by chance? What is the biggest, most popular brand of guitar in the world?
I don't know what brands.
Fender, right? People think of Fender and Gibson are like the brands, right? If you know guitars, like those are the big guitars. And so their strategy is what? Is to produce a bunch of different styles, brands, colors, sizes, price points, etc., because they're trying to target the entirety of the market, right? Now, you guys understand, like a market gap, right? It's like a niche of the market. It's like a piece of the pie. And the reality is that as you are pursuing an entrepreneurial endeavor, you don't have to serve the totality of the market to be successful. If you find a gap or a niche that you can do and serve effectively, that may be a source of opportunity. There's a company that's called Daisy Rock Guitars. I suspect none of you have ever heard of it. Most people have not heard of it. Even in Nashville, where it seems like 80% of the people play guitar, right? Very few people have heard of it. Well, it turns out that Daisy Rock Guitars is a brand that specializes in women, in particular young women. Now, I don't know anything about guitars, and so I didn't know that there was such a difference, but turns out that their guitars are smaller, the styles, the color scheme, and so they're not Fender, they're not Gibson, but they're just selling to a much smaller piece of the pie, but they're very successful, right? What they have done is they have found a gap in the marketplace and found an opportunity. And the last example here is there's a gym close to my house that's open 24 hours a day. And when it was building it, do you guys have that here? 24 hours a day. Good, because when I saw this, I thought, why? I mean, I understand the gym that's open 24 hours a day. Who is going to go to the gym at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? I have a hard enough time going at 7 in the morning or at 6 in the afternoon. And so, like, who would go at 2 o'clock in the morning? Well, it turns out that every time I drive by there now, at midnight, at 2 o'clock in the morning, or at 4 o'clock in the morning, there's a few people working out there. And I'm going, and so as I've used this example in class, I ask, and my students always say, oh yeah, I go there. Oh yeah, I go there. And I say, why do you go to work? It was like, well, because I like to do my homework, and I finish my homework at 12, and that's when I get my energy, and then I like to go work out. Okay. Or people have said, well, I work late, I get out of my shift at midnight, and so that's the only time that I have to go work out. Well, it's not the totality of the market what they're serving. It is a very narrow market niche, but they're doing very well. Now, me, the only time I'm never awake at 2 o'clock in the morning anymore, even when I used to party. But now, if I'm up at that time, it's because I'm going to the airport, probably. That's the only time you're going to see me up. I was going to wrap up by saying that as you think about where you are on your entrepreneurial journey, right? Hopefully, you've gotten 2 or 3 ideas of something you hadn't heard before, but hopefully you can place, what is she trying to do? Solve a problem. If she persuades enough people to part with their money, right? Like, she has found a source of opportunity, right? And so I hope that you can place, that you see wherever you are in your own entrepreneurial journey, whether you're thinking about starting a business or are working on an internal project in your organizations, that you can place this somewhere, and that you've taken a couple of ideas to discuss and reflect and think about. The reason, let me transition as I asked Renée to come up, the reason why we are here is because we have been working on a project that is trying to capitalize on what we believe is a real important opportunity. And so we're going to discuss some of that. We're going to talk about what does it take to be successful to deploying an opportunity or a plan, and especially discuss the importance of ecosystem building. So, why are we here?
We are here representing Transformational Business Network. We're a global organization of impact investors and social entrepreneurs that take an enterprise approach to reducing poverty all around the world. Our founder came up with this idea to create a network of business leaders about 25 years ago. He's from Malaysia, grew up in a really poor family. His parents put them all through school just using their family business. And he eventually went on to become a tech entrepreneur, went on to become a philanthropist, and at a certain point in his life became really disillusioned with the effectiveness of his philanthropy. And that's where TBN, Transformational Business Network, was born. And fast forward 25 years, we're in 3 different continents. We have 8 different chapters in Asia, in Africa, and Latin America now. And we're groups of leaders, groups of entrepreneurs and investors and all the different organizations in between that help connect the gaps between people who provide capital and people who are running businesses and creating value. And so that's a little bit of why we're here.
And it's a little different than traditional investing. You use the word impact investing. Raise your hand if you've heard that term.
Who's familiar with impact investing?
Impact investing.
1, 2,
Okay.
Ellie,
So maybe
3.
we should just talk a little bit because it's, probably everybody's familiar with the concept of investing and investors and venture capital and all of that. But this is a little different, just to set the tone so that we can talk about the ecosystem.
So impact investing, to put it very simply, is using finance and investment as a tool to fund social or environmental good. And so instead of just looking for a return on your investment through profit, you're looking for a return on your investment through, you can choose a variety of ways you want to create impact, through creating jobs, through perhaps conservation in an area that has degraded wildlife, through helping provide access to opportunities for a specific group of people that are in vulnerable situations. But essentially, it's using the tools of finance to create social or environmental good.
Mm-hmm. Right. So if I think back, hearing you talk about that, if you think back what I was saying about the entrepreneurial process, for a lot of people, yes, we understand it's like the creation of wealth, right, and financial returns. But this impact investing space and field that, namely, it's been around for a while, but it really hasn't taken hold in Latin America. There's a lot of opportunity. It shifts a little bit the focus from just looking at financial returns, but expands what the entrepreneurial endeavor that these investors invest in, shifts us away from exclusively financial returns, and they use the word impact returns or other types of value that's created. And so that's why we're here, and we're trying to build an ecosystem, certainly in Guatemala and across Latin America, because as you just said, our founder of TBN has done a lot of work on other continents, but nothing in LATAM, and so that's what you're doing.
I have a question for you all. How many, since we're speaking in English, who's familiar with the term bottom line in your business? You know, your bottom line, this is how much profit we're generating. So a mindset shift, if you will, if you're thinking about impact investing and social entrepreneurship, there's a term called the triple bottom line. So instead of just thinking about the profit of your business, you're also thinking about the impact that you're creating, and that could be even the way that you run your company as well, the benefits and the environment that you create for your employees, your people. And then it can be the impact that you're creating in a community or through a service that you're providing, et cetera. So just to kind of give you something to visualize, instead of just one bottom line, there's more than one. Maybe it's 2, maybe it's 3, hopefully not 4. It's hard enough to do one sometimes.
Correct. And so we are here trying to grow this network that's very large already in other parts of the world. And what we know is that this concept works when there is an ecosystem, an entrepreneurial ecosystem. What do you think about when you think about what that is and the importance of growing one, and how does all that work?
I would love to think about, I think an ecosystem is such a broad term and concept. And I often think about, okay, what is not an ecosystem? Because I have a question for you a little bit later to kind of jump in, but I thought we could do an exercise. I'm going to put out a word and you tell me if it's an ecosystem or not, okay? So number 1, is Coca-Cola, the Coca-Cola company, an ecosystem? From your understanding, just general understanding of the word? No. What about the moon? We have some yeses. We have some no's. What about the Darien jungle in Panama? Ecosystem? That's an easy one. What about the dry corridor here in Guate in Central America? Ecosystem. Okay. What about our digestive system, our microbiome? So what does that tell us about ecosystems? What are some of those things that they all have in common? Just any ideas? You can shout them out. Yeah, exactly. So nobody said a moon was an ecosystem. Can you tell me why? No organisms, right, that we know of. So I think
life.
no life. That's I just wanted to paint a picture of an ecosystem can be so many different things. You just contrasting the dry corridor, which are dry lands. There's not a lot growing there, and yet it's still an ecosystem because there's different organisms and actors. And when you contrast it with the Darien jungle, it's an ecosystem. It's just more alive. And so what we're doing with TBN is we're trying to support impact entrepreneurs and trying to help impact investors begin and become better impact investors is creating environments where they can collaborate more effectively and where they can build their businesses more effectively, where they can grow and where they have that support and connection to do that sustainably in the long term. And so to do that, we need different actors, we need different perspectives, we need capital, we need mentors, and et cetera.
Yeah, that's a really good description and painting, because I'm thinking over the last couple of days we've had meetings with all kinds of individuals to try to elevate this awareness and this discussion about the importance of growing the impact ecosystem in certainly Guatemala and across Central America, right? And so for that it takes all those players in an entrepreneurial ecosystem. So who are the players? Well, at the center is the entrepreneurs themselves, those who have ideas that are opportunities, whichever bucket they feel in, but that they want to make some impact, something meaningful, something of value, again, in the geographies where they're operating. But it also takes the financial resources, right? And that's a lot of the connections and the world for which we come from. The people with money that understand, that are willing to make compromises on their expected returns to see projects that have impact in ways that, again, it's a different lens from the traditional. Who are other players in that ecosystem?
I would say mentors are a big part of a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem, but also an impact ecosystem. Because there's, when we talked about we're adding additional bottom lines, I think you're adding additional things to think about and things to execute well. And I think to be able to really execute those things well, you need a good team, but you need people who can speak into what you're creating and building and growing, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What else? What would you add?
Well, certainly in our case, UFM is a very important part of the ecosystem, right? Because of a myriad of reasons. One is it's an academic institution with very high reputation, lots of connections, and lots of institutional connections that can help us those that come from other places, navigate and understand how business is done, how business works or sometimes doesn't work, and then identify the needs and where the opportunities might be. Certainly, we've talked a lot about our awareness about the environmental space, ecotourism, manufacturing, things that have to do with job creation we were talking about earlier today. So having UFM is a very important part of that ecosystem for us, because it's allowing us to accelerate the deployment of our business model, right?
Yeah. It's almost like you need an actor to kind of put all the pieces together sometimes, because we have very different perspectives. If you're just talking about an entrepreneur and an investor, their day-to-days are completely different. Their decision-making processes, what they look for is often quite different. Mm-hmm. And so I think UFM is a good example of an actor that can help connect some of the dots and create almost like a community around a specific topic or theme, and in this case, it's impact investing and social entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
Jose, I have a question for you.
Okay.
And I don't know, is an ecosystem in the entrepreneurial sense the same as building a community? And I ask because I admire the way you've built community, and I've also seen the different entrepreneurial endeavors that you've had within some of those circles. And so I'm curious what your thought is.
Yeah, I think I think so. Yeah, I mean that follow-up question is yeah, automatically made me think yes, of course, right? An ecosystem to thrive needs to work and needs to work well, and so and that evokes the concept of community, right? Of things living together well or working together well for things to thrive, and so so yes, I would say that. There are ecosystems that don't work well, where community is not, where a connected community isn't built. And but for an ecosystem to work well, or those that work well, is because it does evoke that sense of community for sure.
Just because it's an ecosystem doesn't mean it's an enabling environment or good.
Correct.
I have it in my mind, the Darien jungle and the dry lands here in Guate, just they're both ecosystems, but the difference between their ability to sustain life is quite stark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I was thinking as you're talking about impact investing and the description of it, and unfortunately we don't have pictures, because images and pictures usually speak 1,000 words. But I'm wondering if you can describe a couple of the successful impact projects that TBN has been involved in, to just share with them, sort of to help paint a picture.
Yeah, happily. So one comes to mind, which is very relevant because it's a conservation project in South Africa. This was one of TBN's first investments 25 plus years ago. And today it's a 5-star ecotourism lodge about 2 hours outside of Cape Town. So there's a safari game drive there. There's beautiful lodges, but it wasn't always like that. It used to be completely degraded wildlife, not a lot of trees, not a lot of no animals. And 25 years ago is when the founder and a group of investors decided to purchase land privately and turn it into this large conservation region. And they've been able to do some really interesting things. They've created a lot of jobs in areas of South Africa that are experiencing a lot of poverty, completely changed the landscape of those communities. They've been able to do mentoring, and people have worked their way up from drivers to managers to managing different aspects of the business. They're currently working in carbon finance. They've planted a native plant to South Africa called Spekboom, created lots of jobs through that, but they're also able to capture tons and tons of carbon on that same land and brought in lots of animals. And so I think that's a fun example to think about, because they have their own ecosystem within an ecosystem within an ecosystem. And we at TBN really enjoy chatting about that.
That is a beautiful project, and it would be very nice to show you the pictures of elephants and tigers and giraffes in a 5-star eco lodge. And again, the impact that's being created, 25 years, and that's kind of evokes that notion of like impact that we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. I'll close with one of my other favorite examples from a project that TBN led in Singapore. So you guys know what a call center is, right? And so this company, there was a company that was created to a call center that was created to live inside of a prison. I like talking about this example because this would never work in Latin America, but it worked in Singapore. And so the problem was that people that are in jail, when they leave, then they're not employable. And so the solution to that was the creation of a call center, worked with the Singaporean government, and created a call center inside of a prison. And so the folks that were serving their sentences, they gained skills, while they are serving their sentence. They get paid. And when they leave, they get their money, and then they have a skill set that allows them to be employable. Right? Now, again, it takes a particular type of culture, Singaporean culture, for that to work, right? Could never work in Latin America, I don't think. But that's a really, it's not a very profitable business, but it is a sustainable business, but it's a business that really has a lot of impact in the reintroduction of felons into society. So there's a couple of examples. Thank you. Always nice to be here.